All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Aspen Dudzik, and I am a communications advisor with the Alberta Forest Products Association. I am joined today here with Janis Simpkins. Janis is the Senior VP of the AFPA, and thank you for joining me, Janis, on our inaugural podcast.
And thanks for having me. It's super fun being here, and I love the plexiglass in between. We've got all the COVID-friendly things happening in.
Yeah, I'm super stoked to be testing out all of this crazy fun technology, and I'm really happy that you're here with me for it. So Janis actually joined us at the AFPA with a bunch of eclectic experiences working in government, in Indigenous relations, energy, and economic development. And she's here today to talk to us about her experience as a woman in forestry, and in particular, a woman in forestry leadership. One of the things that makes Janis so unique is that she's actually quite new to this industry. So Janis, could you tell us a little bit about your journey to get here?
I would love to. Again, it's so great to be here, and it's always, fun and interesting to talk about, my career and how I got here and how that kind of relates to others. I actually like to start my story by telling people that I really began my career as a paramedic. So
A paramedic?
A paramedic. Yeah, I was in Saskatchewan at the time, started my career as a paramedic. And the reason that I think that it's so relevant is because there are so many things and so many skills that I learned as a paramedic that I still notice today have really carried through my career. So as a paramedic, you're making quick decisions, you're meeting so many different people from many walks of life, you're keeping them calm in stressful situations, you're learning how to relate to people. Mm-hmm. And that is actually really foundational to many of the things that I've done in my career, right? It's that really drawing on that skill set as I move through. So I actually moved to Alberta, not to date myself, but 20 years ago. I was on the 2-year plan, believe it or not. So I was, going to move to Alberta, pay off my student loans, then I was going to move back to Saskatchewan. So I moved up to northern Alberta to a forest community. I worked there in a little bit in the oil field. And eventually I was working for a company, really kind of invested in the community just because we were trying to attract employees and attract skilled workers to our own business. And as a result, got super involved in the community and ended up running for local politics. So when I say, this kind of really diverse career and diverse skill set, it's because I've done kind of a lot of different things, right? A really unique path. And I'm more and more comfortable sharing that path. At the time, it kind of seemed like you were just like tripping into things and moving into one thing into another. And the more that I've evaluated kind of my own career and my life and those skills that I got started way back when I was, young, just coming out of school, I really see how that's grown my career.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Janis, from paramedic to local politics to a number of other different roles and now to senior VP at the AFPA, were you ever afraid to take on something you didn't have a ton of experience in?
Absolutely, all the time, yes. The interesting thing is that I have moved to a lot of different spaces. And every time I've moved into them, I've always questioned like, oh, do I know enough about this, right? Do I know, what am I going to do? And you kind of walk into a bit of a black box, not knowing what to expect. But in every one of those opportunities that I've experienced along the way, what I've noticed the most is that I get into it and a few days in, I feel a lot more comfortable, right? Like I feel, wait, I have these skills. I know how to do this. There's a little bit of a method to my madness, right? You jump into the role, you learn a bit about it, you get to know the players, you know the space, and you kind of put together a little bit of a plan around that. And that comes from every skill that you've learned and grown along the way. There's those couple of skills, of course, that I got in those first days as a paramedic where you learn how to relate to people again, all of those quick decisions, that kind of stuff. You grow on those in each of your roles, right? Yeah. You're honing them. You're making them something that's really a part of you. So even though completely afraid as I jump into those roles and not knowing that I'm, going to know what to do or not knowing that I'm going to be able to do that job, or maybe there was a piece in that job description that I didn't think that I was going to be able to do, realizing that with a little bit of effort, a little bit of planning, a little bit of learning, and then, bringing all those skills that I have to bear in that role, it's really not as hard as I thought it was going to be.
So Janis, it's obviously been quite the journey for you to get all the way here, starting as a paramedic and now senior VP at the AFPA. So I was wondering if you could tell us, why should women consider a career in the forest sector today?
Yeah, I mean, other than the fact that the forest sector is a community like I have never known, I mentioned that I feel like they've really kind of brought me underneath their wing. I think the other big thing is that this is a sustainable sector. I mean, this is a sector that's going to be around for many years to come, and it's an innovating sector. We see all the time, even with the pandemic, the forestry sector was something that really came to bear on the pulp and paper side with some of the products. So, and even as we look at some of the things that are happening around plastics, we know that the forest sector is sustainable, and that's where we're going to be turning, and that's where that innovation is going to occur. So I really think that this is the place that women can look to, use the skills that they've learned in along kind of their own paths, or even if you're just entering out into your career for the first time, that there is so much more than just kind of being on the ground. There is, whether or not it's a career in the pulp and paper side, at the sawmill, whether or not it's public relations, corporate strategy, there's so many different things that you can do in a sector like this, and it's really one that I hope people consider.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there is just so much opportunity right now. What would you say to a woman that's already in the forest sector but is considering a leadership position?
Great question. I think for women who are considering, getting into leadership, think about the ways that you're leading already. We're leading projects, we're leading files, we're leading ideas, we're leading solutions. Those things all translate into how you will be a leader and how you can act as a leader. My other advice that I would give is that if you're considering a leadership position is talk to other leaders, talk to other people who have been in that position, talk to other women, especially, talk about their journeys, understand how they got there, what was valuable to them. And then again, think about your value proposition. You want to be that leader. Why do you want to be a leader? Why are you passionate about that? And then what do you have to offer? Yeah. What are you bringing to bear at that table?
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you, Janice. So, Janice, one of the things that we haven't had a chance to talk about, and one of the things that I know about you, is that you're actually a single mom. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what that's like and how that's had an impact on your career.
It hasn't all been easy. It's been tough. When I took my first government job, it was in Peace River. It was I had to do a 3-hour round trip commute because there was no daycare there. And so I had to live in another town where I actually had a bit of a support system. And, that was really tough working through. When I was working at government, really long, demanding hours, even here in the city, 2 boys who were extremely busy and, into all the different activities. And it was really tough trying to kind of manage that. But I think the biggest thing, that I can say about managing family is balance looks different for everybody. So you got to find balance that works for you. And you've got to know that, there is more of an open conversation around, how to find that balance with families now. And I think people are willing to have that conversation in the workplace a little bit more than maybe they were previously. Don't plan yourself out of the position that you're in. There's many times throughout my career where I've thought, I can't do that, right? There's no way that I can get my kids to all the places that they need to be and do that job. But instead of, saying no, or instead of, kind of giving in right off the bat, I trusted that I would find a way. And, it hasn't all been me. I've had great support systems, but I've always found a way. Really interesting story that I'll tell. Just a quick one. I was in an interview once, not very long ago, before I took the job here with AFPA. And it was one of those interviews where you're just talking, you have kind of like that hour-long interview, just getting to know each other a little bit with the headhunter. And so we'd had some small talk at the beginning. I'd mentioned my family. And later on in the conversation, he said to me, tell me a little bit about how you think you're going to do this job with a family. You might have to travel and so on and so forth. And, how are you going to manage that? And my instant response was, I think I'll manage that like every other executive with a family. And that was it. It was, it was kind of one of those really profound questions that like they're already planning about the fact that I can't do this job, when really that's a decision that I need to make for myself. Now, of course, in my mind, I'm like, how am I going to do that, right? Like, what if I do have to travel to, overseas, and how am I going to make that work? But I know that I will make it work, and I know that my family will make it work. And, I really think that my family unit is stronger as a result of the fact that we've really had to work together to make it work for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Janice. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Thanks.
So, Janice, I know that we've covered a lot of different questions today, but we actually had some of our Instagram followers at Alberta Forests submit a couple of questions that they wanted to ask a woman in forestry and forestry leadership. Would you mind taking some of those today?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Our first question here, Janice, what does a typical day look like for you?
There is no typical days. I think that's the first thing that I would say. A typical day for me, I work in downtown Edmonton. So, right now I've been working from home. I get up. I'm a big proponent of scanning the news, figuring out if there's anything kind of that's going to be coming at us today or that might be interesting or kind of affect some of the work that we currently have going on. Grab my cup of coffee, which is of vital importance. Highly recommend that. And then, it's checking in on some of the policy pieces that we're working on. I have a really great team that I get to work with on a daily basis at the AFPA, so I check in with them. We've got a couple of really big projects that are going on. I might be asking advice or asking for some information. And then I'm also doing a lot of advocacy. So that means that I'm talking to some of my counterparts in government. Could be on a specific policy piece. It could just be a check-in. And ideally, I try to work in a little bit of networking during the day too. So who else do I need to be contacting with and finding out what's going on in the scene so we can be thinking forward about what's coming at us next.
Mm-hmm. Sounds very busy, Janice.
I
gotta say.
It's so busy, but I love it, right? What I love the most about my job is that I get to move from like one space to another space. One moment we'll be talking about the importance of a multi-species approach and of working landscape. And the next minute we're talking about, a compound at a mill or a facility that we're working with air policy on to see that we can make sure that we have the right kind of regulatory outcomes that we're striving towards. So, and then the next day I get to do a podcast. Mm-hmm. So it's really busy, but also it's really interesting that you get to move across kind of a number of different places.
Yeah, for sure. It keeps you on your toes.
Absolutely.
So our next question here comes from another woman in a leadership position in forestry. And she's wondering what are some ways that she can get involved, I guess, in maybe spreading this message about the importance of women being in our industry.
That's a great question. And I say it's a great question because it's a question that I've been asking myself a lot lately. So when this opportunity came up, for this particular conference and event, for me, it was something that even though I'm a little bit terrified to be doing kind of my first podcast, and, it's a little scary when you're talking about yourself and your own career too, and being a little bit vulnerable about your own experience. Mm-hmm. But to me, I think that is the way. I think being open about things that you've experienced along the way in your career, being really open about the challenges, but also being really open about the opportunities. I think being really self-aware and just sharing that with others. I think people really open up to and respect the fact that, we're all kind of fighting our own battles and we're all, driving towards our different goals and kind of realizing our ambition. So be open about your experience, be willing to talk about your experience, find avenues, and connect with other women and maybe other women in leadership and even other men in leadership and ask the question, what can we do? Mm-hmm. What can we do?
Yeah, you're right, Janice. And it's so important to build that network and to have those cheerleaders in your background.
Well, I can say I don't think, the Women in Forestry Conference started from nowhere, right? It was somebody who had an idea about wanting to do something for women in the industry and to promote women in the industry and talk about different women in the industry. And that started somewhere. So think about the things that you can do in your own company, the things you can do with colleagues that you've met along the way, both in your industry and out of your industry, and then put it to work.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. So our next question here, very interesting. What challenges do you encounter as a woman in this industry, and is forestry management inclusive?
I think the biggest challenge that I've encountered so far is the fact that I'm so self-aware that I am often the only woman in the room. Mm-hmm. And that can be really challenging from, how you think about yourself in that position, how you think about the conversation that's going, when you're thinking about kind of your own value, your own worth in the room. Oftentimes you're maybe overthinking what other people's perspective of you are being in the room. So I think that is probably kind of one of the biggest challenges is really experiencing it on a daily basis. And then the other biggest challenge is thinking about how to change it. I can honestly say that most of the rooms that I've been in and the conversations that I've had with our members in our industry and even with other folks in government or otherwise has been really, really positive. They've been really receptive, and I've felt really valued and respected in those conversations.
Mm-hmm. And that's so important.
It really is.
Our next question here is your proficiency or education ever questioned because of your gender, directly or indirectly?
Another good question, another tough one. I think it's really hard to know if whether or not you're being questioned in a room or maybe feeling deferred is because of your gender. I think certainly we make some of those inferences. I can recall I was in a meeting the other day with one of my colleagues here, and we were having a good conversation about a few of the specific projects that I was working on. So, I would they'd ask a question, I'd provide kind of a rundown of the issue, go through some of the solution space, and immediately the response from them was turned to my male colleague, right? Okay, well, maybe we could do this. What do you think about this? Insert name here of my colleague. And I was really frustrated about that. I remember being really frustrated at the time, feeling really like, are you not listening to me? Like, do you not appreciate that, I'm the one that's actually bringing forward this information? But what I really appreciated about what happened in that moment is that my colleague deferred back to me. So he's like, really, Janice is leading that. Janice, what do you think? And I thought that that was a really, self-aware moment for him. And we talked about it after, and he acknowledged, he's like, yeah, I could easily see that that's what happened. That was what was happening. And we talked about like, well, is that because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm new here, right? I've only been here for so many months. He's been in the industry longer, so I had more relationships. So I can't be sure of the reason that it occurred, but it did occur. And the first place that I went to was, I'm a woman, you don't respect me enough. You don't see the value that I have to offer. That said, you got to keep going anyway, right? He can defer all he wants. I'm going to keep coming in with the answers because I need to get something done in this meeting, and I have the answers, and it's important to put them forward. So whether or not that happens, whether or not, you're feeling like you're maybe not valued, or because you're a woman, or whatever the reason being, that they're moving away from what you have to offer, keep offering it.
Mm-hmm,
keep
right.
offering it.
And, you're the expert on that particular file and that situation, and you have important things to say, and you're going to say it.
Absolutely.
So another question here. What is one of the biggest barriers that you've had to overcome?
The biggest barrier that I've had to overcome is how I feel about myself. I probably mentioned at some point in this podcast that, there's often times where I felt like a bit of an imposter. You walk into a room, you're talking about things that, you're not necessarily the expert on, or even people who are 15, 20 years your senior. And it can be really easy to question whether or not what you're putting forward is meaningful. You walk out of the room and you're like, oh, was the question that I asked, like, did that make sense? Was my answer, was that okay? And you're constantly questioning that. And that has been my biggest barrier, which is why I always say you have to work on yourself first, because people can read that in you, right? Like, you hear the fake it till you make it. And I do think that that's an opportunity, and that's a thing that people do. And I'm sure that I've done it many a time, right? You're not feeling confident, but you're going to put it out there anyway. But it really is, understanding your own value again, really believing in yourself, really respecting the fact that you have something to offer. If you want others people's to respect that you have something to offer, I think you have to respect it in yourself. And for me, that's been the biggest challenge, is just believing that I'm worth it, believing that I have something to offer, believing that I have value, and then acting on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're so right, Janice. It starts with you. You have to trust yourself and know your value and just go for it.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you see the value in yourself, people will see the value in you. I really believe that.
Yeah, I agree. So our last question here, Janice, we'll wrap it up with this one. I actually really like this question. What is something unique that women bring to the forestry industry?
Perspective. We have grown up in different ways. We have done different things throughout our lives. We've experienced different sports, different educations. We have all these different experiences. They shape the way that we take in information, the way that we perceive information, and then our thoughts around that information that we've taken in. So I really think that the unique thing that women bring is our own perspective based on our own experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about bringing something fresh to the table.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Janice, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. It's been a really exciting way for us to break in all of this new podcast equipment. And thank you for joining me on the inaugural podcast. I mean, how exciting is that? I'm really stoked to be here with you to talk about women working in the forest sector and women working in leadership. And I think you've had a lot of really great insights to share with us today. And I just really appreciate your time.
It has been an absolute blast being here. It's been interesting, our first experience, maybe even a little bit intimidating, both kind of put on the spot with some questions, and then, the mic's in your face and you have everything going. But, I have a huge appreciation for people who do this on a more regular basis. If I could say anything, other than the fact that I feel really proud to be a woman in a leadership position, I feel really grateful for all the people who have helped me and supported me along the way. I feel really grateful for all the learnings that I've had in my own career and in my life. And I feel really grateful to be in a place where I have a platform in a supportive industry to share a bit about my story. My big thing that I think I would leave with women along the way and anyone who is listening is that you really need to trust and believe in yourself. it really starts with you. It starts with the work that you put into yourself. It starts with acknowledging your own value and thinking really hard about what that value is and then believing it. That will really carry you so far in your career. And as you do that along the way, and I think can share that message with others, that there is no secret ingredient to moving up in the world. There is no secret ingredient to moving into leadership. It is so much more than even the topics we've been able to cover today. But focusing on yourself is the best place to start.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Janice.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.